Welcome in. This is Scootsy16 with another video for Super Mega Baseball 4. And this video is going to be a little different from what I've done in the past. I have been thinking about it a lot. I've gotten a little bit of feedback in some of my recent videos and just talking with some friends that play the game. I've realized that some of the systems within Super Mega Baseball 4 are a little unique and a little bit complex, and primarily talking about chemistry as well as the traits. Now, if you played a previous version of Super Mega Baseball, you're familiar with some of these traits, but a huge change in Super Mega Baseball 4 is the fact that now chemistry is getting involved. So what I wanted to do was actually create two videos, a part one and a part two, that kind of break down how chemistry and the traits work in Super Mega Baseball 4. And hopefully this will, for individuals that are just starting playing this game, will give you a resource to help understand exactly how team structure works. And then in part two, I want to dive a little deeper into the strategy. We can talk about some of the ways to roster or construct your roster. We'll talk a little bit about some of the traits that might be more impactful than others, and we'll talk more specifically about some of those traits. So today's goal, and in this video, this is part one, where we're just going to talk about how the system works. So in order to do this, I'm going to kind of show off some teams here just to give you some examples of what we're talking about. So we'll start off. I'm going to go to customization, and I'm going to head all the way to the top here to the standard Super Mega Legend League. And I'm sorry, Super Mega League. Now, just a quick note, these three leagues right here, Super Mega League, Legends League, Creators Classic, these are three default leagues. You cannot edit, you can't change anything. You can make a copy of those leagues if you want to, and then edit things from there. But these three will never change. These are default leagues. And then there are ways you can create custom leagues and all of that. But for now, what I want to do is I want to pick a team. We'll just start with the Moose here. And I want to show you what a roster construction looks like by default. So if we get to the roster screen, what I'm going to ask you to do is direct your attention to the far right side. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see two different boxes. You're going to see one box that says number of traits across team, and you'll see the orange is 5, yellow is 5, purple is 6, blue is 4, and green is 1. Below that, you're going to see the number of players per chemistry, and then you're going to see that trait potency. So that's what I think a lot of confusion happens when you're playing this game, and I wanted to break down how both of those two boxes make sense. So for this team, I'm going to go over to the screen that says, or that shows the traits, and you're going to see in this column right here, this is the chemistry trait screen. This is the chemistry column. So you'll see that each player has their own chemistry, and it aligns with those 5 different categories. Those are going to be orange is competitive, yellow is spirited, purple is disciplined, blue is scholarly, and then green is crafty. Now, you don't necessarily need to know the names. The colors work just fine, and everything is associated with the colors, but just to make sure that I'm on the same page with you as we go through this. Now, you're going to see a couple of things. The first off is if we look at Stallion Johnson here, and you can see his player card on the far left, he has the disciplined chemistry. That's kind of what I like to call his personality. He has a disciplined personality. And that's just because I want to make sure that I'm separating the traits from the players. Now you'll see that he also has off-speed hitter as a trait, and it's purple, meaning that this is a disciplined trait. So this is a player that has a trait that aligns with his personality. But if I go down to Fred Bobbitt, the next player on this list, he has a spirited personality, but he has an orange trait, this being sprinter, which is competitive. So not every player will have a trait that aligns with their personality. And that can be a little bit confusing, But as we get into this, hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. You can also see like Hieronymus Jackson here has outside pitch, but he's spirited. You even see Rip Dingers has two different traits, power versus left-handed pitchers and low pitch, and he has a disciplined personality. So that's the first thing I wanted to explain, is that not every player has a trait, and those that do have traits will not always align with what their personality or their chemistry type is. So with that out of the way, the next thing I want to do is I want to explain, well, first of all, we can look at that number of traits across team on the far right, and what you'll see is there are 5 orange traits, or 5 competitive traits. So that would be sprinter, that would be first pitch prayer, cannon arm, tough out, and then K neglector. So those are all of the orange traits that are on this team. You'll also see that there's only one crafty or green trait, and that's going to be distractor from Nacho Crisp. What this helps you to understand is, as you're putting your roster structure together, you want to try and find players that have the same personalities as the traits you have the most of. So I might want to try and aim to get more disciplined players on my team, because I want to increase the potency of my disciplined traits, because I have 6 of them. We'll talk about that in part 2 around roster construction, but I do want to dig into that trait potency. And one of the ways that you can figure this out for any trait that you have is going to be through, if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner where you have your guide of what buttons to press, that help/traits, I'm on PS5, so that's just the pad in the middle of my screen. And if I press that, it's going to tell me some more details about this trait. For anyone on Xbox, or if you're on PC, there should be an icon next to that that will help you to determine how you're going to find out information about your traits. So when I pull up a trait, this one being, actually, let's do an easy one. We're going to go with tough out, because this is easy to visualize. So when I go to tough out and I press my pad in the middle of my controller, you're going to see some details. So first thing it's going to tell you is, how does this trait work? It says that I get plus 25 contact when batting with a 2-strike count. So anytime this player has 2 strikes on them, they are going to get this trait kicking in. But underneath, you're going to see plus 12 contact, plus 25, and then plus 50. And this is where I think a lot of people get confused as well, because what we're trying to figure out is how potent or how impactful is this trait going to be. Well, that's determined based on your roster construction. So I'm going to back out of here for just a second, and I'm going to, again, direct your attention to the bottom right-hand corner. When you look at the number of players per chemistry, you'll see that the orange, or competitive, has 5 players that are competitive. So as we're looking at that, if you come back over to the players themselves, you'll see that Irene Fast, Pedro Nixon, Lionel Martinez, Buck Swiner, and Charlie Best. Those are the 5 players that have a competitive chemistry personality. And that's what makes up this roster potency of tier 2, is what I like to call it. Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So do you see those lines in that number of players per chemistry box in the bottom right? There's 2 players, and then there's a line that's bold, then there's 3 players, and then there's these silhouettes of players, and then those dotted lines for that second column, right? That's the tier 3, meaning that if I look at elite curveball here, there are 4 players that are scholarly, and that gets me at least the 3 that I need to be able to have the tier 2 effectiveness, meaning it's a minor times 2 effect instead of just a small times 1 effect if I only had 2 players on the team that were scholarly. And I'll show you an example of this on a different team in just a second. If I get to 7 players on the team that have a scholarly personality, then this elite curveball is going to get up to tier 3, which will have a major effect. And if we go back to tough out for a second, you'll see that if we were to get up to 7 players that were competitive, that means instead of plus 25 contact, that's plus 50 contact, which is huge because if we look at Rhodes, on the left-hand side, you see his contact attribute is at 27, which means that in a two-strike count at tier 2 tough out, he gets plus 25 contact. So that means he gets up to 52 contact. If we got that up to tier 3 and we had 7 players on the roster that were competitive, that means he gets plus 50, and now his contact is better than his power. Now it's up to 77. And that's a pretty substantial impact to have on him when he's in the middle of a plate appearance and he has 2 strikes on him. So that's the example of how this works. And there's different traits that do different things, and we can kind of break that down in more detail in the second part of this series. But next, I want to show you an example of a team that has a roster construction with some traits getting that tier 3 max boost and other traits with that tier 1 minimum boost. So let's see. Let's look at the Herbosaurs here. Here's a good example. Perfect. So this roster construction is probably not ideal because if we look at the number of traits across the team on the right-hand side, there are 9 spirited traits, but it's getting a tier 2 boost, whereas there's only 3 competitive traits or orange traits, and they are getting a full third tier boost. So if we look down at Whopper Batsman here, he also has tough out, but now it's tier 3, the top boost, because there are 7 players on the team that are competitive. So if I look at his trait, because it's getting that max boost, he gets plus 50 contact in a 2-strike count. So when Whopper Batsman is in a 2-strike count, he goes from 15 contact all the way up to 65 contact, which makes him a much more valuable player at that point, right? And what you'll also notice is that this is a good trait. Tough out is a good trait, but K Neglector down here is red. This is a bad trait. It's a negative impact on that player. So if we look at Elric Rippin here and we take a look at his trait, it says -8 velocity and -8 junk when pitching with a 2-strike count. So he's going to get worse once he gets to 2 strikes. But because it is this chemistry or the orange traits are being maxed out, that means bad traits are getting a minimum debuff, right? So instead of it being -15 and 15 for velocity and junk, or if there were no traits, then it would be -30 and -30 for velocity and junk. In this case, it has its least impactful effect in those scenarios. So I hope that makes sense. And I want to show another example. If we look at this trait right here, easy jumps, this is you'll see that the green or the crafty traits in the bottom right-hand corner, there's only 2 players that are crafty, which means we didn't get to that tier 2 boost. So we're at tier 1, which means good traits are getting a minimal effect here, -8 accuracy to the pitcher when you're up to bat, instead of it being 15 or 30. So even the good traits don't have much impact. But the bad traits are going to have the worst impact possible. So this one says, when pitching, opposing base runners gain increased running speed when attempting to steal a base, and this has a major effect, which means those base runners have a great opportunity to try and steal on this pitcher because of that tier 1 chemistry impact that this has. So I hope that makes sense. And of course, please let me know in the chat below, in the comment section, if you have any questions or need any additional clarity. But what you're going to notice is as you're putting a team together, you want to kind of simultaneously keep an eye on how many traits you have on the team. And you also want to identify how many players you're bringing in that have those chemistry personalities. So if I was looking at this roster, one recommendation that I would do is I would probably look to find one of those disciplined players. Since there's six of them, I could either find a seventh player to bring into the team to get that to the tier three boost, or I can take one of those players and replace them with a crafty player so that my crafty traits get up to tier two. So those are some of the things that you can think about here. What I'd also probably do is shift my focus away from um, the tier three competitive or orange traits. And I would probably want to focus on bringing in more spirited players to boost those 9 traits that I have from tier two up to tier three. So that's kind of the strategy you want to implement as you're putting a team together. And to give you an example uh, of a team where roster construction does make a little bit more sense, I'll go to a team that I've put together to kind of give you some examples. So we will go to, I think, this team right here. Nope, I apologize for jumping around here. There is one team that I wanted to show. Okay, so in this example, what you're going to see on the right-hand side is that this team has 12 spirited traits, and it has 8 crafty traits. So 12 yellow, 8 green. So I wanted to make sure that the traits I have the most of are getting the most impact. So if you take a look at, let's say, Edison midfield here, for example, he has RBI hero and he has clutch, and they're fully maxed out. So that means that when runners are on second or third, he's going to get a +3 power boost or 30 power boost and +20 contact boost. So that's really, really valuable for him. You'll also see that he gets clutch. So when the pressure is higher, he's going to see an increase in his skills, all of his skills, because of that clutch trait. And that's going to be helpful to make him a great player even better in those scenarios. What you'll also notice is a player like, here's Press Handspringer. He has reverse splits, and that's going to be completely maxed out because it's a tier 3 trait right now. And that means that when he's facing an opposing handed batter, that batter is going to take a -20 power and -30 contact hit to their attributes. So these are some of the strategies that you can implement to make sure that the traits that you do have on your team are as impactful as possible so that you can see that value. It can make some players that aren't very good even better in certain scenarios, like Rally Stopper here. Dan Goodman is not a good player, but when I have a tier 3 Rally Stopper, if there's at least 2 runners on base, he gets +20 velocity, +20 junk, and +20 accuracy. So that velocity and accuracy goes from 56 and 57 up to 76 and 77, which can make him much more valuable to this team in certain scenarios. So that's really what I wanted to show off in this video. Just how does the team roster structure work, especially if you're going through a shuffle draft when you're constructing a roster. What I would say is you want to try and find players that will come in and help boost some of those valuable traits. And as we get into our part 2 of this series, you're going to have me showing off what a lot of these traits do, some of the more impactful traits and the ones that you'd maybe want to build your team around. But for right now, I want to ask you all, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you have any questions, if you need any clarity on anything, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any other ideas for tutorials or explanations that you'd like around how this game works, please let me know, and those ideas could come into play for any future videos. But I do want to say thank you so much, and if you bear with me for just a second, I can actually try and find the person that suggested this to give them some credit on a previous video. And let's see if I can give you the name really quick. So again, Bear with me for just a second. Okay, so the person that ended up giving me this idea, appreciate you, was Blue Champ X. So thank you so much for the recommendation. It took a while between you sending that idea and me actually executing on it, but thank you so much for the suggestion and keep those coming, everyone. If there's anything you want to watch, I'd be happy to try and put that into a video. So thank you so much. Let me know what questions you have, any comments, any ideas you have, and I look forward to seeing you all next time in part 2.